I didn't have the money to have a vast record collection, so I learned everything really from the radio, and in the in the mid '60s, AM radio, pop radio, was just this incredible thing that played all kinds of music. Just you could hear Frank Sinatra right into the Yardbirds, or the Beatles, into Dean Martin. It was this amazing thing, and I miss it in a way because music has become so compartmentalized now. But in those days, it was all right in one spot. And that's, we used to learn, when I was 15 or 16 playing in groups, we used to sit in the car and try to write the lyrics down as the song was playing, and we'd assign each person a verse. I'm going to do the first one, and you go for the second one. And then sometimes you'd wait an hour for it to come on again, so you could finish it up.
What's the song you did that with?
I'll tell you, the hardest one was Get Off My Cloud by the Stones. It had so many words.
Oh, and fast, too.
Yeah, and it took us a good three hours to get that one written down. But it was that kind of thing. It was a friend, and it was something that was there. You didn't really think about it that much, but looking back on it, it was such a musical education.
Well, I want to play another track from your new CD, Highway Companion, and this is a song called Down South. Is there a story behind the song?
Yeah, this was I had, a long time ago, I had done a conceptual record about the South called Southern Accents. And this one was inspired by a book by a fellow named Warren Zanes, had written this book about the South, and I read it, and I was really impressed by it. And then I started thinking, well, what if I haven't been back there in a long, long time. I lived there, 35 years ago, and grew up there. But I went, just kind of went back in my mind, and a story started to kind of develop and appear. And I'm not really sure who that character is, but I know part of it's me. And I wrote it. I wrote it kind of quickly. I wrote the lyrics out first before I did the music, which is unusual for me. And then I searched for a long time to find music that created the right tonal kind of thing with the lyric and had to find a melody that went with it. So it took a little while to pull the whole thing together, but it's one that I'm most pleased.
I want to ask you about a couple of lines in that song. You said you're not quite sure who the character is in it, but the song has headed back down south, going to see my daddy's mistress, going to buy back her forgiveness. Did you go back home to see your father's mistress? Is that part of the character? You?
My father's had many mistresses. I never made a specific trip to meet them, but my dad was he was hell on wheels, He was quite a character, and he was one of those people that was somehow remained likable, though he was really a cad, But but I don't really know where I guess the line just popped into my head, and it seemed a good way to start it.
No, something I want to mention about the track that we just heard. It has that kind of jangly rhythm guitar.
Yeah.
That you play. How did you start playing in that style?
I don't know. It just appeared. I think we were inspired a lot by Roger McGuinn of the Byrds and his 12-string playing, and it was just something that came to me naturally, and I kind of took it from there, and I think we've developed it into our own thing. But I'm sure it comes back, from the Byrds, from you hear that sound in a lot of early 60s records, and the Beatles used it a lot, and Dylan used it. And between myself and Mike Campbell, our guitarist, we just make that sound when we play now. I'm not really as conscious of it as other people are, but it just kind of happens.
You grew up in Gainesville, Florida. I
Yeah,
know. I think there's a branch of the University of Florida in Gainesville, right?
it is there, the University of Florida, the
Were-
whole thing.
So were you in a college part of Gainesville, or were you in a different part of town?
No, I was in the redneck hillbilly part. I wasn't part of the academic circle, but it's an interesting place because you can meet almost any kind of person from many walks of life because of the university. But it's really surrounded by this kind of very rural kind of people that are, they're farmers or tractor drivers or just all kind of game wardens, you name it. So it's an interesting blend. My family wasn't involved in the college. They were more of just your white trash kind of family, and so I have that kind of background, but I always kind of aspired to be something else, and I made a lot of different friends over the years that were passing through.
What did your parents do for a living?
Well, my mother worked in the tax collector's office and as a clerk, and my dad had a variety of jobs. From at one point he owned the only grocery store in the black part of town, the only black grocery store that catered exclusively to black people, and so I used to go down there when I was quite young, and I was just put out in the back, and so it was unusual to me that I'd play all day with black kids, and then they'd bring me back to our little suburb that we lived in, and it was all white kids, And then from there, he did a whole line of different jobs of being an insurance salesman, a truck driver, all kinds of different things.
Now, you had an uncle. I guess this is a famous story in your life because you got to meet Elvis Presley on a movie set when you were 11 through an uncle of yours who was doing something on the set, though I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I had an uncle by marriage who was the kind of, he was very into film. He was the guy in town that developed all the film, and he had a movie camera. He used to film the college basketball practices and football practices, and when a movie came nearby, as a lot of them did around northern Florida, he would usually hire on to a set and work in some capacity. And he was working on an Elvis Presley movie in 1961, I think, Follow That Dream, that was called. And I was invited there by my aunt, drove me down to see Elvis. And I really didn't have much idea of who Elvis was. I was only 11. But we did indeed go there, and it was quite a circus. A lot of, as you'd expect, mobs in the street, and he was just back from the army, and but I didn't really talk with him. I mean, he just sort of nodded my way. Was introduced by my uncle as these are my nephew and my two cousins were with me, and he just, I don't remember what he said really, but I was very impressed by it. And when I went home, I kind of scoured the neighborhood and came up with some old Elvis records, and I started listening to them, and they really took me over. And these were all 50s records. And I had a friend whose older sister had gone to college and left this beautiful box of 45s of rock and roll, from the 50s, and I loved it. It just spoke to me. It seemed like such a magic. There was no information about the records. I was dying to know stuff about them, and there was no such thing then as a book on rock and roll or
Or
any
liner
kind.
notes.
Yeah, there were fan magazines, but there was nothing really, intelligent. There was, you could read Elvis's favorite color, but you really didn't know, much about the records. And finally, I did find a book in England. I had to send away to England and pay send $1 to England, and they sent me a discography that lined up how the records, came out and when they were made and this and that. And so from there on, I got really interested in all the Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, all these people. So I was just this 11-year-old kid, and I was already, not involved with my own generation until the Beatles came. I sort of felt, in the Stones and all that British invasion, I kind of felt like that was my generation. And that was interesting to me because they were playing this 50s music in a slightly different way.
So how long did it take after that until you started to play something yourself?
Well, the idea had never dawned on me until I saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, like so many musicians did. When I saw it, I didn't think you could just become a rock and roll singer. I didn't see how it could happen, because you needed to be in a movie and have the music appear on the beach and stuff. So I didn't see how one would get that together, So when I saw the Beatles, it sort of hit me like a lightning bolt to the brain that, I see, you have your friends and you all learn an instrument and you're a self-contained unit. This is brilliant, and this looks like a great job to me. And apparently it did to lots of people, because very quickly after that there were bands forming, in garages all over town. And I was just one in, thousands of little bands that started then in around 64, 65. Magical place, and the odd thing was, in those days,